Hi, everybody. I'm Adriana Hopkins with 7 News DC, coming to you from the Prince George's County Memorial Library System. Monday at 7 p.m., watch Christine Pride and Jo Piazza, co-authors of Good Morning America's book club selection, We Are Not Like Them, in conversation with PGCMLS CEO Roberta Phillips. We Are Not Like Them is an evocative and riveting novel about the lifelong bond between two women, one black and one white, whose friendship is indelibly altered by a tragic event. End your year with the wonderful sounds of the marimba. Tuesday at 6 p.m., come hear the beauty of this massive mallet percussion instrument performed by percussionist Matt Keown. This virtual event features classical music written especially for the marimba that blends concert music and the inescapable folk sound of the instrument. The South Bowie Branch Library is hosting a virtual book discussion on Nothing to See Here by Kevin Wilson. Join that discussion Tuesday at 6:30 p.m. by registering on pgcmls.info/events. Bowie teenagers, do you need community service hours for graduation and want to make a difference in your community? Join the Bowie Branch Library virtually on Wednesday at 3 p.m. to jump into one of their bi-weekly teen action group meetings. From novice to experienced writers, all are welcome to find a creative voice through writing short stories, poems, and novels with PGCMLS. Share ideas, find inspiration, and participate in group critiques with other like minds. Join the Akakeek branch for this writers group virtual event Wednesday at 6 p.m. Thursday at 10 a.m., PGCMLS staff host a virtual read aloud for you and your little ones to enjoy at home, in the car, just about anywhere. Join for stories, songs, and more. Then at 10:30, kids can bust a move and shake their sillies out at the New Carrollton Branch Library. Parents and caregivers, you should definitely prepare yourselves to boogie and bop until the music stops. This dance party will take place outdoors in front of the library. Thanks for watching, and next week we'll go over some great resources to help you make some handmade gifts this holiday season. Have a great week.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Prince George's County Memorial Library System's virtual event series. My name is Nick Brown. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for Communication and Outreach. Wonderfully honored to welcome you tonight, along with our friends, the Prince George's County Office of Human Rights, which is our co-presenter of the evening, and as well as many other events. We have a very special treat for all of you tonight. We have two wonderful distinguished authors and literary icons and figures with us. They are Christine Pride and Jo Piazza, and they will be interviewed by the library's CEO, Roberta Phillips. And I'm just going to give you a quick intro to Christine and Jo's bios, and then we're going to welcome them on up. Christine Pride is a writer, editor, and longtime publishing veteran. She's held editorial posts at many different trade imprints, including Doubleday, Broadway, Crown, Hyperion, and Simon Schuster. And as an editor, she has published a range of books with a special emphasis on inspirational stories and memoirs, including numerous New York Times bestsellers. As a freelance editorial consultant, she does select editing and proposal content development, as well as teaching and coaching, and pens a regular column, Race Matters, for Cup of Joe. She lives in New York City, but is a Maryland native. Our neighboring county, Montgomery County, she hails from Silver Spring, but now she decamped to New York City, as many are wont to do, which is pretty awesome. But we're so grateful that she's been willing to join us tonight and celebrate Maryland roots with one of the local library systems. And joining Christine is co-author Jo Piazza, who is an award-winning journalist, editor, and podcast host. Her work has appeared in the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, CNN, Marie Claire, Glamour, and other notable publications. She's also the author of Charlotte Walsh Likes to Win, How to Be Married, The Knockoff, Fitness Junkie, and If Nuns Ruled the World. I definitely need to pick that one up. And she lives in Philadelphia with her husband and two small children. And lastly, before we bring up our wonderful guests, just want to remind everyone that there are a couple ways that you can support our authors tonight. One is, of course, by checking out their book and books from the library. We have them in print, ebook, and audiobook, and then also buying a copy from our wonderful local independent bookstore based in Prince George's County, which is Black owned, and that is Mahogany Books. And I'll share a link in the chat where you can order a copy from Mahogany. Without further ado, I'm going to switch things over here to Roberta, Christine, and Jo. Enjoy the show, everyone.
Good evening, and we all have our buns today, so we're looking very, pulled together, almost, might I say, a little stereotypical librarian, but that's okay.
Well, Rick didn't have his.
Yeah, no man bun there. But I'm so happy you were able to join us tonight. I was saying in the green room that I read this book. I was blown away by it. And I said to Nick, oh my gosh, we have to have them. He's like, all right, let's see if I can make it happen. And here we are. So for those of you who haven't read the book, I'm just going to do a little synopsis. I won't do any spoilers. We Are Not Like Them explores really complex questions of race and how they pervade and shape our most intimate spaces in what we all know is a very polarized world right now. But at the heart of the story is friendship. And you know, what happens when something externally invades that friendship, right? So can you tell me a little bit about how you met and how your friendship led to kind of this collaboration that you're in?
Sure. It's been 48 hours since we did an event, so we lost the thread of we take turns of like who's going first.
Yeah. We did just do a bunch of interview questions, so I think you left off, so I'll go.
Okay, there you go.
I'm coming live to you now from my children's bunk room, by the way. I put grease on for them, so I'm hoping that keeps them occupied for the next hour. If not, they will come in and do their version of Grease Lightning for everyone, which
nice.
Really if we ever heard one.
Yeah. So Christine and I met when she was my editor on my last book, Charlotte Walsh Likes to Win. And we got along really well. Like there was this instant spark of friendship, which I think is rare when you're a grown-up of a certain age. It's harder to make friends as we get older. And we loved working together. Christine is the best editor that I've ever had. By the way, she likes it when I tell this part of the story because she just likes it when I say that line.
It's true. I'm like, you go first.
You. And but she was. And after we finished Charlotte, we did a really quickie novel together for the TV show Younger, which is set in publishing. And they wanted us to do a version of a novel that was mentioned on the show. So we had 4 weeks to write the novel Marriage Vacation. And although Christine was ostensibly the editor, when you have 4 weeks to do anything, you're both doing all of the things. Mm-hmm. And after that, I think, you know, we loved working together. And maybe we also had a little bit of Stockholm syndrome because we're like, let's do it again. What else can we do together? And Christine had like a little nugget for an idea for a book. And I'm not sure if she really thought she was ever going to write it. But she mentioned,
I can answer that. I definitely didn't. I mean, you know, as an editor, you always have ideas for your books like simmering in the background. I've been an editor for 20 years, and sometimes it's like, I'd love to see this book in the world, or I'd love if this writer would tackle this topic, or this feels in the zeitgeist. Somebody should, you know, explore this further. And from a personal standpoint, I had been as many of us were, just kind of beleaguered and horrified by all of the waves of police violence. And it did, you know, always feel like it was coming in these really oppressive waves. And this is, you know, Jo and I started this book in 2018. So this is, you know, we're going back in time even, that this idea was percolating. And when Jo and I got to this crossroads in January 2018, where we were finished with Marriage Vacation, and, you know, kind of figuring out for both of us what's next, it seemed like an aligning of the stars in that I had this idea and we had this collaboration or potential for collaboration and a way to do something really unique that hadn't been done before, to use our different perspectives and experiences to write this novel together, in a way that, you know, would be a very different book than if either of us wrote it alone. And we think a better book, right? Because it is only the conversations and experiences that we had, you know, along the way.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that like immediate connection. We had author Michelle Harper. I don't know if you have all read her book, The Beauty in Breaking. It's fabulous. You must read it. Oh, yeah. But we had that instant connection. Yeah. And, you know, I grew up in a very, I was telling Christine backstage, I grew up in a very insulated bubble. My father was very racist. We lived in a white neighborhood with mostly Catholic people that all went to our church.
Mhm.
And Michelle is Black and I'm white. And I didn't even think about the racial difference. I just automatically liked her as a person, which, you know, you think about like, I don't have any Black friends, or I don't have any Asian friends, or I don't have any, Native American friends or Indigenous people friends, but really it's about how do you connect, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So what happens when two people are so close that become divided by race, like the characters in your book?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Roberta, it's really interesting that you said that, because that's kind of what happened with Christina and I too. I mean, I grew up in a very white suburb of Philadelphia. My parents aren't racist, but they're definitely not like woke per se.
Right.
I hate the word woke, but they're not. They just haven't been exposed to that much. They definitely say the wrong things sometimes. Christine's heard. My mom's in the next room, so I'm whispering now. Christine's definitely heard my mom say the wrong things sometimes. But she's a well-meaning lady, but I really didn't think about race when I first met Christine. I'm just like, oh, this is a cool ass lady that I would like to be friends with, right? And so, and also because we met when we were older and like on a professional basis, we hadn't talked about race before. And so all of a sudden we're writing this book about race, and we had no choice but to have these really serious conversations that we hadn't had before. I'm just reading Roberta.
I know, we do.
All right, well, Roberta, you're in the fun.
There's nothing like I love more than making a new friend.
Yeah.
Yes.
As soon as possible, we will come down and have French fries with you.
Awesome. Deal. But yeah, it's just interesting. And we talk about, making friends at different ages. In the story, the girls kind of grow up together. So talk a little bit about like how that might be different than like where we're now, where we're making friends at our age. And I'm probably much older than both you ladies, but making friends at our age is such a different kind of reality and thing. And,
it's so different. And, I mean, the parallels between Jo and I meeting as new friends, but Riley and Jen meeting when they did, is that, they hadn't talked about race because there was no reason for it to come up when you're on the playground or, at school, especially back in the day, so to speak, like when these characters were 5 and 7 and 9. It might be a little more different now because I think race is so much part of like learning and curriculums and whatever in schools. People are just a little more aware at a younger age even. But, we talked earlier, I'm a Silver Spring native, and we were talking about how it is rarer to have opportunities to make friends with kids of another race. Like you have to be in a specific environment for that to happen. And I feel like a virtue of growing up in the DC suburbs is that it is an inherently diverse area. And so it wasn't strange for me to play with all different kinds of kids, in first grade on. And so some of the lifelong friendships I have, are with, kids I met in elementary school, like my best friend, Julie, who we met in first grade at Belle Prix. And so that kind of interracial relationship has been such a part of the fabric of my life that it's like, you're normal, right? It doesn't mean anything to me. But when it's a different prospect when you meet a friend as an adult, because I mean, one of the things that Jo and I talked about, and you talked about too, Roberta, in terms of you mentioned going to Michigan and meeting new friends, is that you're so formed by the family background that you come from, that part of the vulnerability of being a person of color or a Black woman making a new friend is you can be as kind of woke, to use the
I know we'll come up with a better word.
We have to come up with a better word. But I don't know, like, could I come home with you for Thanksgiving? Are you at Thanksgiving hearing and participating in conversations that I would be horrified by, right? Like there's you, and then there's your world and community. And sometimes that can be a fraught line that we see play out between Riley and Jen.
So the answer is no for me anyways, because my next door neighbors invited us for their early Thanksgiving, and my husband and I were the only white people, and we had no problems
That's
talking
amazing. I love
talking
that.
about the mac and cheese and the greens and the in fact, it's really exciting for me to live in a diverse neighborhood finally after all these years of being, sequestered. I've read a lot of reviews of your books, and they're so glorious. Of course, there's always going to be critics, right? And one of the critics said that they didn't think that Jen showed enough growth, and I guess that they're referring to her ability to see race and to see her place in the world. How do you respond to that?
I mean, honestly, I think that Jen showed the growth she was capable of. And the few criticisms, and there have been criticisms, and actually I love it. I'm happy that there are like both good and bad reviews of this book, because it means that people are reading it critically, and that's what we want. We want to start these conversations. But
well, also, can I just add too, when you write a book about race, a lot of it is people are bringing racial perspectives or issues or things to the table. It's not about like the quality of the book itself, right?
Right, yeah.
Springboard of, wait, no, this shouldn't have happened or this should have happened, because we project so much of what we want in the world on our characters.
So much. But a lot of people have projected what they want to happen, like their idealized fairy tale version of what they would like to happen. And we feel like the amount of growth that Jen was able to have and the book is set in 3 months, right, Christine? It's like a 3 month.
It's like 6, but yeah.
6?
I mean, it's March, late November, ends in March.
What's the difference?
I
5,
can't
4.5. I can't do math. That's why we write books. But
it's bad.
I think that is the amount of growth she would have had. And I think by making her do anything more, it wouldn't have felt real to a lot of other readers. Like other readers would have been like, or it would have, like, her new wokeness would have been annoying, right? It's like, look at me, now I'm marching. And also we have to remember her divided loyalties too. She's scared for her family. She's scared for her husband and for her son. And so it just did not feel realistic that Jen would have had this universal awakening. I think that she would have to come to it over time. I mean, in the same way that I think our country is having to come to it.
Well, and I'm glad you said that about time, because, saying you're an ally and actually being one,
totally different things.
Putting the switch on the light, right? You're not saying, okay, now I'm an ally and I understand everything. I don't have those lived experiences, so I'm learning. And luckily, I have a very diverse staff and a very diverse, place to live. And so for me, I get feedback all the time, like, man, Roberta, you should have done this, and my staff is really good about that, about telling me, like, this is what, and you said she was fearing for her family. And you think about, people who have said to me, I'm afraid my husband's going to go out in the world and not come home because he's a Black man. And I'm just like, I cannot even fathom that reality.
Yeah.
So how did writing this book make you account for, like, your own bias, right? Because it's so difficult for people to, like, recognize their own bias and then, like you said, work through that. So how did that show up for you all?
Oh God, how long do we have again?
Yeah, right?
Till the end of this call, or to kids show up. Whichever comes sooner, we don't know.
Really until
you all come here and we have fries. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
But for me, like, as the white lady in this situation, I sometimes compare it to, like, I was nearsighted and then all of a sudden I got glasses and I'm like, holy shit, I can see things in a totally different way. Now, like, my background was, like, I grew up, like I said, in this very white suburb, went to Penn, which on paper, Ivy League school, very diverse. People self-segregated a lot, right? In, like, very specific niches. Like, I really just hung out with other, like, white kids from the Philadelphia suburbs that specifically played lacrosse or soccer. Like, it was not a very wide swath. And that also was probably my fault, and also just a product of people trying to be comfortable when you're 18 and fucking terrified about leaving home for the first time, right?
Right.
And so I have to say, I have not had many close Black friends. I've had work acquaintances, colleagues, neighbors, people I'll have a drink or go to yoga with, but like no one that I'm gonna like really shoot the shit and like delve into what's your family like what
Right.
experiences shaped you. And so
Right.
Christine is the first person that I've had like, you know, Black woman in my life. And I think that that was probably annoying for her. And I know that she has been the only Black friend to a lot of white people too. My favorite joke of hers is I should have a business card made up that says Christine Pride, everyone's one Black friend.
Well, I can monetize this somehow.
Right. There's always a way to take it a nap.
Always on the hustle. But I have to say that, you know, she like did take it with grace, and I was terrified of saying the wrong thing all the time, right? I'm like, I don't want to say something stupid. I don't want to say something that it could be misconstrued, that she could be insulted by. And I've been a journalist my entire life and covered so many different things, but somehow talking about race as in-depth as we had to talk about it was very different from covering almost anything that I have ever covered before. I think that's because race has really become the third rail in America. We're very white people, and when I say we, I don't mean Christine. Christine has talked about race since she could talk, right? But white people in America are very uncomfortable talking about race for so many different reasons, cultural reasons, because the media makes it such, you know, a topic that is pitting everyone against each other. So I had to get very comfortable with just talking about it. With like being uncomfortable and maybe saying the wrong thing and saying to Christine, look, I'm scared. My anxiety is not because I do not want to talk about this or I want to, you know, sweep it under the rug and say it doesn't exist. It's because I'm just like nervous of sounding really stupid. And I think that's a hard thing for anyone to admit, right?
Yeah, I mean, and I think just opening the door to conversation for a lot of people is, you know, it's a smaller step to say, oh my gosh, I'm gonna like, you know, I'm gonna open the door and see what happens, because it's scary, right? Especially, you know, if you come from a background that didn't embrace diversity or inclusion. And I think, you know, what I felt like when I read the book is that, you know, Riley and Jen did have a deep love. They really felt like they were family. And, you know, then this event happens and then they're just, you know, just thrust into these really, really
almost,
roles, you know? And then the question came to me like, well, what is the real role of an ally? You know, like what does Jen do? And what, you know, like how, Christine, what do you think a real role of an ally is? Because you can say, oh, I'm an ally. And then you can like, I'm going to march and all that. But what does that really mean? And for me, I'm very blessed because Michelle Hamill, who's on my team, and she'll say things to me like, Roberta, in that meeting, you should have had my back by saying this and this, you know? And I'm like, oh shit, like, I'm so sorry, Michelle. And she's like, no, I'm gonna educate you. And she also heads up our race and equity team that we've created in our organization. So she's very knowledgeable. And of course she has the lived experience. So she'll say, this is what it means to have my back. But Christine, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think all that is so important, and it's this tricky line between, and we talk about this a lot. I mean, we talked about a lot of the context of the book, but just in terms of allyship and race in America in general, it's a tricky balance between like you want people to be allies, right? And you want to have this close connection. And so that does involve having the conversations like you just mentioned that, you know, you and Michelle have on your staff, or like Joe and I would have, or like, no, this is how it is. And this is why I think this way. And this is my lived experience or whatever. But the balance is also, and you don't want to just feel like you're educating some distant masses of people to act a certain way, right? So I think that when you talk about the conversation being opened and then built upon, it's I'm willing to to have these conversations with Jo, or Michelle is willing to have them with you, or lots of people are willing to do it, because it is not just a quid pro quo, but it's about investing in something else. It's about investing in a relationship. It's not just like transactional of I'm going to help you be an ally, or, you know, a stranger coming up to me and asking me these questions, right? So the context of how these communications happen and how allyship is fostered and developed really matters. You can't just say, I want to be an ally and XYZ, you know, you have to make it that way. Like, you tell me this and tell me where to show up for this march, and I'll do this and I'm willing, but, you know, you have to make this happen for me. Like, what should I do? That's not really what it's about. It's about these one-on-one relationships, and really what we hope is hopeful about the book, and what we really wanted to show people through Riley and Jen's relationship, is it is these intimate one-on-one connections that build on each other that change the world, right? Like that Riley and Jen have now seen their relationship and seen each other through a different lens, have a better understanding. Jen, as incremental as it may be, you know, frustratingly so sometimes, will still grow and make a different decision, or say a different thing, or call somebody out in a different way, like over time. And then Riley will appreciate that, see that she got right, and it builds and builds on each other. And so I just want to say something too about, like, you know, some people were saying, I think the same people are like, Jen didn't, you know, have enough growth, would say things like, you know, I can't believe, like, I was supposed to feel empathy for Jen. Like, you know, I'm so pure, like her white girl tears, blah, 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 you know, all the like extreme things. And I think that's just also such an interesting reaction that comes straight from, you know, projection in a lot of ways, which is, I mean, if you stop and ask yourself, short of Jen being a monster, which she is not, then why shouldn't you feel some empathy for her? Like, what is it costing us to say, yeah, that was like messed up that she said that, but that doesn't mean she deserves to be excised from Riley, exiled, I mean, from Riley's life, period. You know, and Jo and I really had to have those kind of conversations in real life, where when it got fraught or we were having intense moments, I mean, we were contractually bound to finish this book together, but at the same time,
we're married.
We were also invested in the outcome, to be like, it's so easy to say, God, she doesn't get it. Like, I'm done. Blah, blah, blah. Like, why bother? You know, and we want to like wipe our hands of relationships sometimes so quickly and thoroughly. And if we had done that, we wouldn't be here today, you know, talking to each other or you.
Right. Well, and, you know, I've had staff really, you know, they're like, we're exhausted. We can't explain it. We're tired of teaching you. Like, the onus shouldn't be on us. Like, you know, and, you know, again, for me, I'm like, I didn't understand that. Like, I didn't really, like, the more I've been reading and the more we've been doing for our organization and our community, like, the more, it's just the more, like, the more you're exposed, the more you practice, the more you listen, then that's how you gain that, you know, empathy and that compassion and that ability to have conversations, right?
We all say it's a process. Like,
it's a muscle that you have to develop. I mean, it's like running, right? I hate freaking running. I'm a terrible runner. You could see me. I mean, I look like a fish. I'm trying to get out of the water, but I keep doing it. And I did my first triathlon last weekend.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Well, and, you know, Nick hates running, and then he does all these races every weekend. He's great. You know,
of course he is. Nick looks very fit. I am not.
Very fit.
So what I wanted to say really quick is, there's a reason we wanted this book to not just be fiction, but like very accessible commercial fiction, because we think that there is a wide swath of people that want to have this conversation, that want to like have a friend of a different race or a different, you know, geographic location, that want diverse friendships, but it's not possible for them because of where they are in their lives or where they live, and that aren't going to pick up a nonfiction book like White Fragility.
Right.
And on the flip side, there are a lot of Black women who want to see their experience represented in the page, and a strong, ambitious Black woman who, you know, and they can enjoy the book and the story and feel seen, you know. So we were trying to reach a lot of different audiences for this book.
And I think, you know, the forum of a story, of course, I'm a librarian, so I have to say this, but no, I truly believe that, everyone has a story, and getting to the heart of what your story is and how you came to be where you are today based on everything we've talked about is so rich. And if, this is the perfect book club selection, and obviously, the morning shows have thought so too. But because it's fictional, so it's a little safer place to start the conversation, because you're not talking about yourself, you're talking about Jen and Riley. Well, I think Riley this, and I think Jen this, right?
Yes.
That's exactly it. Yeah.
That's exactly it. And that's what we're seeing so much of.
Definitely.
With Christine and I, we show up to a lot of book clubs, like almost every night, usually at bedtime. And but those are the kinds of conversation starters. And what we were talking about before with like performative actions and the kinds of comments that sometimes we see on social media or Instagram, once people are in their book club groups, they're a little more comfortable. And frankly, after those couple glasses of wine, and I am in a lot of like we're both in all white book clubs a lot, or all black book clubs, because book clubs do tend to be segregated. And I'm in some on my own. And then women say, I do empathize with Jen, but I don't want to. Or I do see my mom in Cookie, but I don't want to. Those are the kinds of things people don't want to say publicly, right? But they are conversation starters in your more intimate spaces. And those are the kinds of things that we want people to be talking about.
Right. And I think, like they always love this one for books, ripped from the headlines, but yours truly is. I mean, it truly is. And when you think about systemic racism and, the light that has been shed on it because of the murders of so many Black and brown people, which, is just insane. This obviously plays into the narrative of your book, and brings up a question about how you both view it, and I think we're making progress. It's baby steps, right? Because we know some of these folks are being prosecuted and going to jail finally, right? Do you think justice?
Very small amounts.
Yeah, that's what I said. It's baby steps. So do you think justice is being served? Do you think justice was served in your book? I mean, that's kind of another juicy little.
It is. It's a really
book. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's something the theme really of our story is, what is justice? Like, what is going to, and justice being both like a sense of repair and make things right. Do you know what I mean? Not just justice in terms of vengeance, but justice to us is all inclusive of all of those ideas, right? So there's, of course, like, what is justice in terms of the criminal case, or like the literal form of like, is what happens to Kevin in the end fair and just? But there's also like, what is going to be justice for Justin and his family? What is going to be justice for Riley and Jen? What is going to make their scales, after all the friction between them, feel balanced? Like, what can they do to each other? What is justice or balance going to be like in Jen and Kevin's marriage? I mean, she feels really betrayed by him, right? And bringing this kind of chaos to their lives and doing this horrible thing. And so I don't think there's one right answer to that. And the flip side of justice, of course, is forgiveness. And we've had so many interesting conversations about forgiveness, and a real range of people who, have different spectrums of like, what is forgivable or not, or how you, like, who is forgiveness for and how do you get to it? And so we love that there's no right answer to this question, or there's no clear answer to this question in our book. Like, that was very intentional. We were not writing a tale that was like, and now in the end, everything is wrapped up.
I love all of our hand motions for we're tying a bow. A bow.
And justice is served. Like, it's right here.
And I think the word that you just used is really important, and that's repair. Like, like, again, it's not something that's happening overnight, right? We've got to repair those things. And I know our county is doing a lot around police reform, as are many cities and states. So that's a big question too in the book, right? So talk to me a little bit about that.
It's funny. I have a new answer for this question, because we were chosen for the Once Upon a Book Club box, which it's amazing. I did not know about it before this, and
Me neither. It's awesome.
It's so thoughtful. Like it's a like a box, like a subscription box, but for different pages of the book, they give you special things from the authors.
Oh,
and so, yeah, really.
I don't know about this.
Yeah,
they did
Once upon a book.
Once upon a book club.
Once upon a book club.
They did a whole recipe for miracle bread. They gave the readers a pearl bracelet, and then we wrote the GG note that you don't see in the book.
That was a spoiler.
Wow,
people have seen it on the Instagram. It's all right.
Okay. Well, Nick just put up the
it's great. I mean, it's great. It's really special.
I'm obsessed.
One of the other things they included in the box was a hand, which I did not know this was coming. The handwritten letter from Kevin to Justin's mom. And so I reread that letter in handwriting, which is always different than seeing it on the page too. And I've had a couple book clubs bring this up, that I don't think it's been talked about enough, that it was Kevin's choice, even though it sometimes feels small and not enough.
Are we allowed to say this? Like, I don't know.
I don't know if we're spoiling.
Yeah, I feel like most people on this might not have read, so maybe we don't say exactly what happens, right? I don't want to give the end away,
but you know,
Kevin is faced with a choice. I guess we could say that.
Yeah, so
no, I won't say anything else. I'm just like, whatever Kevin, I think it's brave, and I think that Kevin, no matter what you think about him in the book, and he kind of had to be a cipher because the book is from Jen and Riley's point of view. We couldn't get inside his head. I think he makes a choice that's brave, and I think he makes a choice towards, wanting change in how policing is done in America today.
Well, and I'm always fascinated by stories of parents or siblings or whoever the person is that can forgive their loved one's killer.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's hard.
That is just
it
like
happens all the time. You know what I mean? If I would not do this, I promise. But if I murdered somebody, my parents would stand by me 100%. Do you know what I mean? Like they would. However they had to rationalize it in their head of what made me do this, they would make it okay. Not okay, but like they would make it so they never had to speak to me again, and they wouldn't write me out of their life.
No.
About this dimension of anybody who does something horrible still has a community of people that love them, that are going to see that horror in a different light, whatever that is, whatever kind of violence or bad decisions that people make, or drug addiction, or these things where people want to be loyal to their loved ones despite the roads that they may take.
Right. And I think Jen is in that position throughout the book. I mean, this is her husband, but this is her best friend. But then she's also got, compassion for Justin. And it's just so lovely, y'all. I love it.
Oh, thank you. Recap like what Jen and Riley had to go through. We're like, God, they really did have to go through a lot in this book.
A lot. Yes.
And it's also, it's such a lovely testament to Riley's family, how they pretty much just kind of like took her as a child and like, this is our daughter's friend. And like, this is just, and they just embraced her. And I felt like Riley's family was just so loving, despite all the hardship and the grief and all of these things. And I don't know, there was just something about them that just, held kind of a special place for me.
And that was really intentional too. I mean, both the loving part, but also the fact that, we see the white savior narrative so much.
Right.
Like we saw the groove that the expectation for this book would be that Riley would be Jen, right? Like Jen would have this amazing family and they would take in the poor little Black girl and help her see, the way to success. And then she became a news anchor and they could take credit because look, they gave her this foundation, right? I mean, how many times have we seen that story over and over?
Right.
So, we were very intentional and specific about subverting that narrative and really showing, how race plays out on the flip side, right? And even seeing like the tiny things where Jen was so close to Riley's family, obviously, but Riley's parents were, particularly her mother, was old enough and wise enough to even try to show Riley, but still you're not the same. You know what I mean? Like, you seem like the same and you're 7. And so I want you guys to be the same, but you have to understand that you're going in the world, with a different reaction and set of experiences and circumstances, and that's a hard thing for Black parents to have to convey to their
and to have those conversations about peace and safety and all of those things.
But then also still putting it aside and being like, but I want to help this girl that my daughter loves. Like I'm going to do whatever it takes. And then, her mom also being like, I want this friendship to continue. I know you love her and we love her too. We helped raise her.
Right. And that was just, I don't know. I just love that twist. And I also liked, the idea that, there's this innocence of children that, like I've seen it before. Like, for example, somebody who is physically challenged, children will walk up and say, why are you in that wheelchair? Why is this? And, and their parents are like, oh, and I've seen some really cool people say, oh, well, I had an accident, but I can still get around and let me show you, so it's that. And I also love the stories that you probably see. There's, these 2 boys who tried to fool their teacher that they were twins because they got the same haircut and one's Black and one's white. I don't know if you saw that. It is the most darling story.
That's really cute.
Wow.
And, their mothers bought them matching outfits and they're like, he, we're going to fool our teacher because we look so much alike, and it was just the most darling story. But, Jen and Riley kind of have that, a little bit of that foundation.
Yeah.
Of having the innocence of being friends and not thinking about the race thing at all. And then when they get into this situation, I mean, even I think someone in their adulthood, they didn't really resonate with them until this tragedy. And then they were like, oh, and so, I think readers will all have different feelings and takeaways from reading a book. And that's the beauty of stories, quite frankly. And I think, what I'm gleaming from you, correct me if I'm wrong, that you kind of want readers to think about some really big themes like justice and forgiveness and diversity. What else am I missing?
Well, I think in friendship, when you're talking about with Riley and Jen being such long-term friends, it is true that by the time this incident happens, because of it, the forefront is, they're thinking about race and it's really playing a role. But there's also just all the universal elements of friendship that we hope people think about and will resonate with them, right? When how you change over time and how in friendship you kind of have to choose each other over and over again. And what are you allowing latitude in a friendship because nobody's perfect, or what, how, do you outgrow friendships or not? And what happens when circumstances change? Somebody makes so much more money than another person, or somebody, you hold on to those friends. No, just kidding. Or somebody gets pregnant, or somebody doesn't. There's so many things that test a relationship, no matter what. And that's just real. And that's such a part of female friendships, and particularly long-term female friendships. Absolutely. And so we hope that even, obviously people talk about the race aspect, but people also talk about, what their friendships and their lives mean to them, and how their friends have showed up, in their lives.
And I think too, there's something about, and I have some very close relationships with women I've met as an adult, but I recently got back in touch with my longtime friend from the 5th grade, right? And we were in each other's weddings, but then we kind of like, we had a big gap where we just like, but when we saw each other again, it was like we had never been away. And
that's so special.
That kind of bond is really inexplicable.
Really
and I felt like Jen and Riley had that bond. Like
that's exactly what they had.
And they knew each other, and that was that. And even though there was all these complexities of life and being a grown up and everything, there was still this
connection.
Yeah.
And sometimes that connection itself is inexplicable. I think so much about the book is, rightfully readers saying, why are Riley and Jen friends? And will they continue to be friends? And what brought them together? And, and we do that about everybody's relationship. Like, why did she marry him? And
Why did she stay married to him?
Yeah. But I think there's also, sometimes you are inexplicably drawn to people, and sometimes you carry on a connection that can't be explained on paper, and you're so different, and everyone's like, how does this work? Or what, you wouldn't be friends if you met them now, but you have that, the eternal flame, so to speak, that's just always burning no matter how far apart you may be, and that's really special.
It is special. I mean, it's not really special that Marianne and I bonded over Starsky and Hutch.
But it's not special.
And we had our scrapbooks, because that was before Instagram and all that. So we had our little scrapbooks, and
I love it.
Yeah, I wish I still.
Wait, do you still have these scrapbooks?
No, I don't have it. Oh. And we went back and forth, like who we liked better, Starsky or Hutch. It was just like,
who were you? Were you Starsky?
Oh, I was always Team Starsky.
Same.
Yeah, always Starsky. Yeah, but then I had a friend later on who looked a little bit like Hutch, and so Marianne was like, "Oh my God, he's so cute," and I'm like, "That's because you always liked Hutch." But I digress.
But I think that there's something so meaningful about people that have been witnesses to your life.
Yes.
In different stages of your life.
Yes.
And who knew you when.
And you can come back to kind of being the person that you were. And there's something very comforting about that too. I just went on a little girls' vacation with my friends from college, who I hadn't seen in 7 years since I moved to the West Coast, then moved back. And all of a sudden we're like the girls that are in their 20s again. And we're talking about all of those memories. And we have had readers say, oh my God, how are they still friends? We also have to remember that Jen and Riley, we never say their age. They're about 33, 34-ish. They were never apart without email or social media. And so they were, or text messages. They always felt like they were in each other's lives, even when they were apart. And I think that kept them together too, because they didn't have to be together. Right? So like, Jen never thought about race because she idolized Riley. She was like, Riley is so successful. She's so smart. She's so beautiful. She's doing all the right things and her family is perfect. She never saw like how race posed an issue in Riley's life.
Right.
So she never questioned it. And then when you become friends on email and text, when you're far away from each other, you don't see it.
And then, in the sequel, we could figure out what Jen decides to do, because she kind of felt unfulfilled career-wise. So I'm just, I'm just like,
I'm like, Roberta, are you working on a sequel? It's like,
great, Roberta. Do you want us to come?
I want Roberta's fan fiction sequel immediately.
Yes,
like I think that a sequel should be a very good tight short story.
Yes,
absolutely. We did do a prequel. We did do
a prequel, which we should release in the U.S. We
wrote a prequel that was a short story of Jen and Riley on Jen's wedding day. So
which is really it. Where can I get it?
It ran in Hello magazine in the UK. But they never put it online. We should ask Lily if we can put it online somewhere.
Yeah. It's really.
I think people would be interested in that. And
I do too. I agree.
Sequel, like how this falls out and how Riley rises to the top of her career even more so and becomes this, icon. And
I would like to see a short story now set on Riley's wedding day. Not saying who she's going to marry.
Really? Well, every Zoom event we do, Joe proposes a curveball, shocking idea.
I just think of something new.
This might be it. Now, tomorrow we're writing a story.
Because
let me know. I'll come in on the brainstorming sessions.
We'll be eating the fries. Roberta, we're coming down.
Okay. All right. Perfect. I'm going to see if there's any of our listeners who have any questions they'd like to pose for these lovely ladies.
Comments.
No, Nick's no questions yet.
Well, we can just keep talking.
We will keep talking. I think I think something else that you said really resonates, and I hope it will change for men, but I think women really have these bonds of friendship that
100%.
are so different. Like my
And
husband is a lovely man, but he says to me, "I'm a really good husband, but I'm not a very good girlfriend."
Same.
And he
My-
recognizes that,
Yeah.
which is wonderful. And then he says, "Go away and be with your girlfriends and
Yeah.
have 5 conversations at one time." And but I think it's interesting that we see that with Jen and Riley, but it's just kind of cursory when you look at like Kevin and his brother and some of the other men in the story. And
Yeah, I don't know how men function. I really don't.
I don't know how they do. I don't know how they
Die
do.
without my friends. Like
Yeah.
I literally would just like be in a puddle on the floor. So
Yeah. My husband, we just found out, like, one of his best friends from college, right? Like, this is a person he would consider a best friend, just had a baby, and he didn't even know this guy's wife was pregnant.
oh wow.
and then you say,
pregnancy too, like she had, because they're older and like she'd gone through a lot, and all of a sudden, like, he got this picture of this baby and he's like, I had no idea. So I immediately call Hal, and I'm like, Hal, what do you need? What can we send you? I'm so like, can we come see the baby? Like, what can we do? I don't know how they function.
Yeah, I don't know.
well, and of course, then you say, "What's the baby's name?" I don't know. Was it a boy? Was it a boy or a girl? Yes.
And I think that's why
Totally.
I had a lot of empathy for Kevin when I was writing him. Because if you think about him outside of the context of how we all feel about the police right now, and how we feel about, the like legal system and the justice system, he's very lonely.
I was just going to say that he is,
and I wish that
lonely.
Isolated. Yeah.
He's isolated, and we did choose like to put it in first person in only Riley and Jen's head, so we couldn't get into Kevin's head, but he's alone out there. Like, he is alienated now from the one thing that's always been his identity, being part of a police family, from his family that has clearly meant so much to him, like more than it does to a lot of people. And now his wife is questioning him. And so through her best friend, and her best friend, who someone asked me about Kevin's view on Riley before, and I'm like, I just think he's intimidated by her. I think he's always been intimidated by her. And so now it feels
also the same way I feel like sometimes your friends' husbands exist in like a distant periphery.
Yes.
I feel like for men too, your wife's friends exist in you're not, we're thinking about husbands more than husbands are like, oh, how's Jill today? Like, what's she been up to? Did Riley get the promotion? Like, they don't give a shit.
Yeah, right.
But I think there's one friend that like he's like Jen cares about Riley so much. So like,
I think he's also a little jealous of their friendship.
Totally.
Definitely.
Because he's like, oh, you're already, you're going to take her side. You're going to always prop her up, and I'm your husband. And so, yeah, I think he's really lonely, and I think that could be another,
totally
spin-off.
right. I think it's fascinating. We haven't talked about this in this talk yet, but we usually do. We did a lot of interviews for this book. I've been a reporter for 20 years. It's how I like get to my fiction. I'm like, I just want to hear real people's stories, and our goal was always to get to the real people behind the headlines. So we talked to a ton of cops, and I have a lot of cop friends and a lot of cop wives.
We have a lot in our neighborhood. Yeah.
I bet. Yeah. And we were actually, when we were bracing ourselves for whatever criticism came for this book, because we're like, we're writing a book about race that's being published in 2021.
Right.
We were prepared. We were a little nervous about the reaction of cops and cops' wives. And so far it's been good, because we tried our best to be as fair and balanced and paint them as much as people who are not caricatures as we possibly could.
Right. And I think we're sensitive to that. I was sensitive to that as a Black person who's, where Black people are so often stereotyped and caricatured, right? You don't want to do that to another group of people, no matter what,
no matter what. Exactly.
Easy to trap to fall into. So whatever your opinions about anybody, like you want to paint it in both the most complexity and dimension as possible, but also rooted in the most authenticity. And in order to do that, like, we had to, talk to a lot of people, right? To like really feel.
Well, that's what makes it so believable, because you feel like, this has been vetted. Because like when I was Kevin's family, and obviously is very blue blood and all of that, and, stick together. But I felt like it was so like, this is what would really have happened in this family, because this is what they know. This is, and we're talking about men, and men identify with what they do.
Yes.
Like when you say to a woman, what do you do? They're like, when? Like, day after, like, when,
I'm like, I just do yoga.
Right. I practice yoga. Like, what do you do? But for men, it immediately is about what they do for a living, their job. Right. So it's very defining. And I think, that's something that is
we have a question.
Okay, go ahead. What's the question?
I don't know what it is.
Ooh.
Oh, can I say it and then show the picture?
Yes.
So Judy Bloom is my like gateway author, like the author that made me realize that I wanted to be a writer and a big reader. Because it was the first, she wrote about like, suburban girls,
and your period.
And my period. And my
Who wrote about that
stuff. And like, I just loved her so much. And I got to meet her last weekend because I did my triathlon in Key West, and I went to Judy's bookstore. And because we were writing about female friendship in our book, I went back and reread Best Friends Forever and all of
Summer
those
Sisters.
Yes. Summer Sisters. Oh God.
Right.
Yes. And I told her all of this, and our book was in the window of Judy's bookshop. And I got
it's you and Judy.
Me and Judy Bloom.
So cute.
Yeah. So I had the perfect visual for that question.
I know.
Awesome.
You should have. It's hard to follow that. I'm like, and Toni Morrison is now. For a lot of reasons. So many reasons.
That's so funny. I heard Toni Morrison speak, and her voice was so like, just her voice was like, so like, not just the words, but like she's one of those people I literally could have, like, she could have read the phone.
She had a podcast.
Right? and you could have heard a pin drop.
Yeah.
I mean, it was like, so Christine, author.
Yeah, mine is more a book. This book, A Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry.
Oh, yeah. Mildred Taylor.
As a librarian, of course, you would know.
Of course. It was always in the Battle of the Books.
Which I checked out from the Aspen Hill Public Library. Shout out Silver Spring Libraries. And, I just, like, as Joe mentioned, like, you want to see yourself in books. And we've come a long way for sure, especially in, children and adolescent literature. But
I feel like YA and adolescent literature has actually
come ahead of the curve
than adult literature.
Definitely, for leaps and bounds. But back when I was a child, which was not that long ago, but also
a few
years ago, there weren't these same options. And so it really, like, I was such an avid reader. So I did end up reading lots of stories about cute little white girls, because there's a lot of stories like Precocious, and they're lost in hotels, and they're, But for me, it was, seeing myself in a book as a child was like such a shift for me, because it was the first time I remember realizing that. You know what I mean? Like, you're reading something that it feels different, and I wouldn't have been able to articulate it I read it early for age group wise.
So you totally have to come back when we have our fries. We'll do it at the National Harbor, and you can go to Mahogany Books.
Yes.
Which is all Black authors. It is amazing, amazing bookstore. And I was a teacher, and I had the same issue. I could never find books for my kids that reflected them. So props to all those YA authors out there.
I think it's so much better now.
Really.
And the children's authors as well, who are portraying all of these wonderful things for kids of every.
And it's so nice to like be an adult now with nieces and nephews and godchildren that like I can buy them books. It's not a struggle. Like, you know what I mean? Like, there's so many great options.
Well, I can't wait till we get together again to have another conversation about the prequel and the sequel.
Yep.
Eat our fries. Go to Mahogany Books.
Done.
You have been a pleasure. And I feel like I have 2 new friends. I'm so excited.
You do. This was such a treat. It was a really fun
It was
conversation.
really nice.
Thank you
so much
for joining us and being with us tonight. And if you have not read We Are Not Like Them, go get it, go buy it, go check it out at your library. It's phenomenal. I love it, and I love you both.
And we're big I mean, we love when people buy books, but we are huge fans of libraries.
Yeah,
so
we're big library.
Yeah.
Like, against what is probably our personal interest, we're like, just go check it out at a library, guys.
Yeah, we love libraries. We love librarians.
Love libraries.
Communities.
Well, we love you too. Thank you again for joining us, and good night to all our listeners.
Night.
Good night, everybody.
Bye.